we will encounter all through the book of Proverbs 3 losers. I don't know what else to call them. That's what they are. 3 classes of people who desperately need wisdom. And the first is the scorner. The second will be the fool. We'll see what that guy's all about. And the final one is the simple. The scorner, the fool, and the simple. And the scorners. What are scorners? Well, they're the ones that mock at God's wisdom for a couple of reasons. First of all, because it's too high for them. It's out of reach. I know many of you could jot down your pad a number of radio commentators that would quickly fill the bill there. Some of these probably have a lot of PhDs and H2SO4s behind their names and serve on committees that cast votes on what Jesus really said. They weren't there, but that's the way that's what they substitute instead of scholarship. The other thing, they will not admit it because they know everything. You know, some of these people, they tend to be on the radio or on television, and you get the impression that when they die, wisdom will die with them. It's astonishing to see people who are just blinded by the persuasion that they have all knowledge. That's one of the. I used to love the way John Ankerberg used to deal with an atheist. If somebody's agnostic, that's a different problem altogether. He just feels he can't know. But an atheist claims to know. And John Ankerberg would always say, okay, prove it. And the guy would be baffled. What do you mean, prove it? Well, if you're an atheist, then you must know everything. Because whatever it is you don't know, God could be hiding behind. But to affirmatively assert that God does not exist implies you've looked everywhere and he ain't there. It's in effect equivalent to saying that you know everything, and which is an easy thing that's an easy attack to launch. Now, the agnostic's a little different kind of problem. The agnostic claims he can't know or doesn't know, and he prefers to use the Greek root was it from gnosko. Agnostic doesn't know. The Latin equivalent, is the synonym in Latin, doesn't go over as well at cocktail parties. I mean, saying I'm an agnostic sort of works, but saying I'm an ignoramus doesn't quite work. But that's the same word in the The Hebrew word for scorner literally means to make a mouth. So often in Hebrew you have wordplay, but that word, their term for scorner, is to make a mouth. And you can easily picture them sneering or curling their lips in scorn. It's a descriptive phrase. It's typical Hebrew. It's a colorful, poetic phrase. The meaning's clear, and yet it's graphic, isn't it? And of course, and because they think they know everything, they will not profit from rebuke, and as a result, they will one day be judged. That's the destiny of the scorner. And all of these we'll encounter as we go through the text. The second loser that we'll encounter again and again throughout this book is the fool. He's a person who is dense, sluggish, careless, and self-satisfied. Sluggish, careless, and self-satisfied. Not making any effort. There's a guy by the name of Nabal. And that, by the way, the word Nabal in the Hebrew means fool. That's the word. But there's also a guy by that name in 1 Samuel 25. A very wealthy sheep herder. And I encourage you in your notes to put 1 Samuel 25. It's a colorful chapter. Basically, Nabal is a wealthy sheep herder. And David is in flight from Saul. He and his gang are nearby this place where Nabal is. And the presence of David and his small army there, of course, is a form of protection for the sheep herders from the Bedouin raiders and others. And so it's time for shearing, which is a time of festivities. Usually that's like harvest, so to speak. David had the presumption that because Nabal had been in his protection, that he would be open, especially at time of feasting, to provide some provisions for his men as a sort of a thank you gift. With me? So he sends 10 guys there to see what they can scrounge up from Nabal. And Nabal's attitude is not only not very gracious, it's insulting. Who's David that I should care? And he just sends back insults instead. David, upon hearing this, his assessment of the situation, that he's going to send 400 there and take him out. He's really upset by this attitude. Apparently, one of the men that overheard all this gets to Nabal's wife, Abigail, and lets her know that trouble's coming because Nabal's attitude has really enraged David and his men. She quickly scoops up provisions, heads there, makes a magnificent speech of apology to David, and provides provision. And David is so impressed that his anger is assuaged, and everything's fine. She goes back. Meanwhile, Nabal has gotten drunk with a big party because that's the occasion for that sort of thing. So she waits till the next morning when he is sober enough to understand the mess they're in. That David, that he had angered David, and you don't anger the king, and so forth. Nabal is so upset that his heart goes to stone, to use a scriptural term, and 10 days later he dies. And David marries Abigail. So it's interesting. That's to give you a short version of it. But Nabal was a fool in just practical terms. But so he's dense, sluggish, careless, and certainly self-satisfied. So the fool hates instruction, according to Proverbs. He hates instruction. So one of the first things you want to check out about yourself is, do you hate instruction? If you do, you run the risk of possibly falling into this category. There are 4 categories: the scorner, the fool, and the simple, and the wise. How many of you are scorners here? Can I see a show of hands? Okay, that's good news. How many of you are fools here? How many of you are simple? I got a couple of cautious hands. Okay. How many of you are the wise? I hope so. Okay. No, that's not. That's everyone hesitant. It's like when I say, well, the most humble person here, raise your hand. No, it's that kind of thing. Okay, the fool hates instruction. The fool is, of course, self-confident. It's interesting how God hates pride. It's interesting how pride gets in the way. See, the only certainty, the only certain barrier to truth, there's only one barrier to truth that's absolutely fatal, and that's the presumption you already have it. If you have any doubt about that at all, you're at least open to listen. But the assurance that you already have it is a certain barrier to it. And that's the worst kind of self-confidence. And of course, the fool has a way of advertising it. He talks without thinking. And I think all of us have done foolish things, so we won't take a vote on that right now. Okay. And of course, the fool mocks at sin. The fool mocks at sin. And all of this, people say, well, we live in an age where this is tough stuff because we're taught in university that you have your truth, I have my truth, everything's relative. Not so. What's right and what's wrong is what God says is right and wrong. Without the authority of God, you're adrift. With the authority of God, it's very clear. It may not be pleasant, but it's very, very clear. And so let's get to the next. We've been to the scorner and the fool. Let's talk about the simple. The simple ones are those that believe everything and everybody and lack discernment. There are many people that may be gullible, but there's something far more here. Those who believe everything and everybody and lack discernment. So they're easily led astray by others, and of course they lack understanding. They can't see ahead, and as a result, they repeatedly walk into trouble. And so there's 2 kinds of people, those that repair trouble and those that anticipate it and avoid it in the first place. And being a troubleshooter and solving problems is great. What's even better is to avoid them in the first place by foresight or wisdom.